Council Wellness Committee, and we are kicking off another challenge. So since this is the season of giving, we are doing a charity challenge. So let's just dig right into the wellness piece of it. You know, we had to have some wellness stuff. So we all know that giving helps others, whether you're volunteering at a soup kitchen or raising money for a charity. But did you know that the warm, fuzzy feeling you get from helping others is actually good for you? Studies show that giving can actually boost your physical and mental health. And these are 6 awesome ways. Lower blood pressure, increased self-esteem, less depression, lower stress levels, longer life, and greater happiness and satisfaction. And I'm not sure about you guys, but right now I'm in it for the lower blood pressure and lower stress levels. All right, Carrie, next screen for me. So this challenge can be done individually. You can do it with your family, or you can do it at work. On this screen, we've put together some local charities that you can get started with, but you certainly can do this with any charity that you wish. And by the way, guys, all of these screens, we're going to send these to you so you don't have to write anything or look at anything, as well as a list of the contact information for all of the organizations you see here. So let's talk about some ways that you can do this. Maybe you want to donate your time. So, whoa, back one. There we go. So there's Ronald McDonald House. If you want to donate your time, you can take a small group of people, maybe 4 or 5 people, and you can go over to the Ronald McDonald House and you can prepare a meal. Or you could take that gang of people and you can go to the Haven Arrest and you can serve a meal. Or maybe you want to take a small gang and head over to the food bank and give them a couple hours of your time. You may want to do a collection at work. This St. Bernard Parish, O.M. and Ronald McDonald House all have food pantries. If you want to do a collection, maybe toiletries, do a toiletry drives for men and women and donate it to the battered women's shelter or to the Haven Arrest. And sometimes at work, it's easier to collect funds. So the Summit County Children's Services it's kind of neat. They have a holiday gift card collection for foster teens in their care, which is kind of a neat thing that they do. If you want to get your family involved and maybe clean off a shelf in your basement, the Humane Society runs the Happy Tales thrift shop over on Merriman. They take donations of small household goods. And the Habitat for Humanity Restore over on Romig Road, they take larger household goods and building materials, stuff out of your garage. And for those of us that are really just more energetic, the Akron Canton Food Bank has a 5K that's December 18th this year. It's called the Selfless Elf, and you can certainly participate in that. Or if maybe your favorite thing on earth is the towpath, which runs through all of our communities, you could donate your time, your talents, or your funds to the Ohio and Erie Canalway Coalition. Okay, I think I covered everybody on this screen. Carrie, how about next screen? Okay, here are some simple steps to take, whether you're doing this as a family or you're doing this at work. Number 1, you choose your charity. Number 2, you have to decide what kind of donation you're going to do. Are you going to collect food or items? Are you going to do a fund drive? Or are you going to volunteer your time and talent somewhere? Number 3, you're going to contact that charity. So all of the groups that we talked about on the past page, they have wish lists. So if you call O.M., they have a food pantry and they're going to tell you what they're in need of right now. If you go online to the Humane Society for their Happy Tales, they'll tell you exactly. They're accepting craft supplies, they're accepting kitchen supplies, that kind of thing. So you'll know exactly what to do. Number 4, you're going to organize. You're going to set start and end dates. Then number 5, the best part, you're going to deliver it. This is really nice if you can do it in person. And take a photo. It sounds silly, but if you're doing this with your family, you want to print it out, maybe put it on your fridge. And if you're doing this at work, you're going to cover your conference table with all of those food items or toiletries that you collected, snap a photo, and email that to everyone to thank them for participating. This is going to keep those warm fuzzies that we talked about a couple slides ago going a little bit longer. All right, Carrie, one more. Okay, so guys, here's the challenge. Summit County Safety Council is going to donate $10 to the Akron Canton Regional Food Bank for each and every individual or company that emails, and you'll see that's Sally's email, and all you have to say is, I did it, or we did it. Tell us the name of your favorite charity. You know, we'd love to see those pictures if you want to attach them. The deadline for this is December 17th, so we've got a month, and the max that we're going to spend, guys, is $1,000. That's 100 emails. So talk to your coworkers, talk to your family, Share this presentation with your HR department when you get it, when Sally emails it out to you, and let's get those emails coming in. And one last thing, in case you guys are super organized and you've already completed your food drive or whatever, that's going to count. So send us an email. You can send that email today. Say, I've already done it, and that's going to count. So make us spend that money, guys. And that's, Terry, that's all I've got. It's back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. I will tell you the Selfless Elf, the run that you talked about, is on the 18th. So Sally, you may be getting some pictures. Hopefully you'll get some pictures a day late. So that'll be fun. So good stuff. I love that the Wellness Committee is still working on ways to keep us engaged, even though we are still virtual at this time. Hopefully that'll change in the next program year, but you know, we're going to do everything that we can, and that's why we wanted to start with the networking as well. So like I said before, Carrie Gray here with the BWC. We are still here for you. We are virtual. There's a little bit more in person coming slowly, but you know, we still are here. So if you're looking for something or have a safety question or need some safety help, folks like myself, Deb, Nick, we're all here for you. One thing I did want to share is we have a newsletter, a safety update newsletter that comes out every single month. And you can sign up to get that newsletter from the BWC. I just threw a link to that in the chat, and you can click on there and go in and put your email and get this newsletter every month once it comes out. And that would be in addition to the awesome newsletter that you get from Sally. And I will tell you, Sally looks at who looks at what and opens up what, and, you know, at least numbers wise. So she knows what's the good stuff that you guys are looking at. And I really am proud of her and all the awesome stuff that we have for the newsletter. There's a couple BWC webinars that I have listed down at the bottom there that are coming up over the next month or two. There's also a lot of the virtual classes that we have, and we've continued doing that over the times that we've been virtual. And these are just the classes through the end of December, and there'll be another list for January. So just know that those are there. The last thing that I wanted to talk about with the BWC resources, and I know I talk about this every month, but just know you don't have to do any of this stuff on your own. There's a lot of sample programs and safety talks and all that kind of stuff. The one thing that I did want to point out, there's a new snow and ice micro video that just came out. We know it is that snow and ice season, right? I don't know about you guys. I got 3 inches on Sunday. Thank goodness it's already melted. But every year we start seeing claims, and they come across our desk of folks slipping, tripping, and falling in the ice. And so we want to do what we can just to try to educate our folks in this new micro training video. And I'll put a link in the chat in just a minute to it. This new micro training video is just kind of a good refresher. It's a good, hey, teach your folks how to walk. Teach them, you know, how to get their center of balance or get their center of gravity a little bit lower, and things that they can do to stay upright when they're walking on snow and ice. So really recommend that. You can use that, share it, push it out to all your staff, and have them watch the video, or do it in a training class, or however you want to do it. But it's out there, it's available. There's a lot of resources for you. The last thing that I have to bring up is there were 12 of you that were our lucky guinea pigs today, and you were on early enough that we brought you into the meeting, and then we put you in a breakout room. We just did a little bit of trying to talk about machine guarding at home, because that ties into machine guarding, our topic here in just a second. But what we want to start doing is we want to open up the meeting starting at 11:30, and we want to stick folks into breakout rooms with like 2 or 3 or 4 people, maybe 5, and they can talk amongst themselves. We'll have a prompt that you can talk about. You can talk about just general life and safety, or whatever you want to talk about within your group, just like we would when we're sitting at a table and having lunch. Now, I don't know that you want to chew and share your lunch while you're doing it virtually. That's kind of gross, but hey, you know, you can do whatever you want. But just know in December, we're going to do this again. So if you want to jump on a few minutes earlier, jump on around 11:30, 11:35 or so, we'll put you in a breakout room. You can talk to folks, and we can try to get some of this networking back that we haven't been able to do as much since we're virtual. Very excited about that one. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to the big main show. And most of you hopefully remember hearing Dianne speak before. She spoke, I want to say, about silica for us about a year or so ago, and it was phenomenal. So she's such an amazing speaker. We're like, you have to come back, and we begged and pleaded, and she graciously agreed. So I'm going to turn it over to Dianne. Now, if you could, down at the very bottom of your screen for everybody, you have a reaction button down at the bottom right-hand corner. So if you could click the reaction button and give a clap, we would love you to give a warm Summit County Safety Council welcome to Dianne. It's all yours.
Thanks, Carrie. I love your energy, guys. You are so fun. So I'm glad to be there, even if it's virtual. So sorry. And I'm feeling some warm fuzzies from all your charity work. So thanks. That's awesome. All right, I have a lot to cover. I tried to cut it down, and there's just so much interesting stuff about machine guarding. I'm not sure you all agree, but hey, what the heck. So I'm going to quickly go through, and yes, I am quick. I did share the PDF of this yesterday, so you don't have to scribble notes. You can have a copy of what I've done to use as a reference if you find it valuable, and if not, okay, I won't be offended. But anyway, I'm going to hit some of the common hazards of machines. We're going to have some photographs of some unguarded machines. I'm going to run through the adequate machine safeguarding options, because I always get confused. What in the world is a safeguarding option? And then maybe some ideas to help you move forward. You know me, I always like to challenge you to do something. So why should we guard? Well, obviously, we're trying to prevent injuries and deaths, right? And there is a fair number. 800 deaths are attributed to lack of machine guarding and more than 9,000 injuries. The other thing that I don't normally talk about, because I don't do workers' compensation, but I thought was worth mentioning, we do have Ohio Administrative Code that actually lists some machine guarding requirements in the safety requirements for the state. So should you have a poorly designed machine and an employee was injured, there is that problem, that potential for a VSSR that could be filed as well. So there is a cost to this as well, beyond just the basic injuries. But I'm going to focus today primarily on the OSHA standards, because you know me, that's what I'm all about, right? That and beyond just the OSHA requirements. So 1910-211, it gives you a bunch of definitions. I'm not reading them to you. 1910-212, though, is the general requirements, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. They say in the OSHA standard, hey, we should use one or more methods to protect our workers. And we should make sure that we're protecting from any hazards created by point of operation, ingoing or in running, however you call that, nip points, rotating parts, flying chips, and sparks. And then finally, you can look at using barrier guards, two-hand tripping devices, electronic safety devices, a variety of things to make sure that we're protecting our workers.
Icon over here.
There are some additional standards that are more specific. We're not going to cover that today, because obviously the BWC even offers machine guarding classes, and it's way more than 1 hour. So we're not going to do this, but if you have this equipment, you want to probably go look at those specific standards to supplement what I'm talking about today. All right. So in the chat, real quick, if the machine is old or you're using it as the manufacturer sold it to you, is the safeguarding always satisfactory? True or false? Quick in the chart, in the chat. Well, let me see what you think. So if you've got an old piece of machinery that's been around since the company started, or you bought something last week, but this is the way the manufacturer sent it, it's always adequate, right? Correct. You guys are all good. False, 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 false. OSHA doesn't regulate the manufacturers. And yes, I find that frustrating as well. But we all should know that it is our responsibility as the employers to make sure that our equipment is adequately guarded. And sometimes, depending on who's involved or the age of the machine, they may not have purchased the guarding package that comes with a piece of machinery. So the part that always confuses me when I start hearing the terminology around safety and guarding is safeguards. What is the difference? So there are actually 5 different classifications that OSHA refers to, and that generally health and safety folks are going to refer to. So we have safeguard barriers, which they actually prevent you from reaching the moving parts. And I think that's what most of us are more familiar with when we think about machine safeguarding. But then you might have a safeguarding device, such as a pressure sensing device, like a mat or something that you would step on, that keeps the machine from operating unless that contact is being made, or sometimes in reverse, stops the machine from working. We might look at location and distance, like I can't physically reach that, right? Like for sometimes example, if it's higher than 7 feet, we don't have to guard it because we can't access it. So that's location and distance. Then we might have auto feed and injection, where we actually have the machine putting that automatically has a way to move the part in and then eject the part so that the employee doesn't have to come in with the contact with the point of operation. And then finally, there's miscellaneous things like push sticks or other tools for putting equipment in, machine pieces in or out, and not making sure our fingers get in the way. So that's the 5 categories that you ought to be thinking about when you're assessing the equipment in your plant on, is the machine guarding or the safeguarding actually adequate? So we're going to start with guards or safeguard barriers, because that's what most of us are familiar with. So that 212 standard talks about making sure that it prevents me, the employee, from being able to reach the hazard zones. And then we want to make sure they're secure. So fasteners that require tools, they don't require a new hazard, they're not going to create interference so the employee can't work on the machine. Ideally, they allow for safe lubrication so that you don't have to take the guard off in order to lubricate the machine. That saves time, and it's more likely that your machine guard will be in place. And then obviously we want to make sure that it withstands normal work conditions. Those are effective machine guards. And I see a chat that says thermal guarding from heat too. Absolutely, you can include that. Most of OSHA standards focus more on the mechanical side, but I certainly would include thermal guarding if I was looking at my machines from adequate guarding. So great question, Michael, thank you. So when I talk about point of operation, what in the world does that mean? Well, it means the point right here in the middle of the screen where whatever that machine is designed to do, that happens. So it could be cutting, it could be punching, it could be shearing, bending, compressing. Those are all point of operation. I don't want my employee to get their hand in there, right? We don't want it cut, punched, sheared, bent, or compressed. Bad day. So we want to make sure that we're making sure that the equipment we have prevents the employee from having access to point of operation. So cutting machines, I think it's pretty obvious to most people what that is. Things like bands and circular saws, lathes, and probably many of us have those pieces of equipment. If not as part of your production, you probably had them in your maintenance shops where the maintenance folks are doing repairs for you or fabricating parts, whatever that might be. So this is an example of a drill press, but there's no guard. Now I appreciate the fact the picture was taken and they put safety glasses on the young lady that's doing it to prevent her from getting any particles in her eyes, but obviously there's no guarding around the point of operation, so her hands are at obvious risk. This is a relatively small part, so she's at higher risk than even a larger part where her hand wouldn't be as close. A couple of other examples you can see in the center. I have an example of a bandsaw. That blade is not guarded. The right is an example of a telescoping blade cover. So it moves up and down to allow you to get the piece in there, but covers that exposed blade. There's actually some consensus standards that will define more information if you're interested, but obviously we aren't going to talk about that all today. And then you might find something like what's on the left, where we have a much larger guard in order to cover the whole working area. In many cases like this, that guard will move, so I can get in there and put the piece in and out, but then it often will have interlocks, an electrical interlock that allows the machine not to operate until that guard's put back in place. So lots of options out there, but we need to find one that prevents my fingers from being able to hit that point of operation. Milling machines are another great example of areas that I see lots of times that we haven't adequately guarded. And I will say one day, I was doing a walkthrough in a facility and they had a couple of milling machines. The young man working had the guard up out of the way, had his safety glasses up on top of his head. And I was walking with the safety person who, for whatever reason, as we all know this is wrong, chose not to say anything to that employee. And I said, I can't just walk by this and not say something. If you're not going to say something, you're condoning that behavior. So I asked the young man why he thought that the guard was there and why he thought he had safety glasses. And he said, oh, in my last job, we didn't have to use those. So I just assume we don't have to use them here either. And so we had a conversation about what might happen, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure in that brief moment I convinced him. But I did challenge that safety person that they needed to be more diligent in having conversations about the requirements to protect their workers so that those individuals didn't get hurt. So another lesson, don't walk by that, right? None of you would, I'm sure, but punching machines, obviously, I think that hazard's pretty apparent, right? If I got my finger in there, there's a lot of force that is part of a punching machine. And so when you take a lot of force in a very small area, it can do a lot of damage. And so our fingers are at huge risk when we're holding parts and pieces in this particular example. These are some examples of a punching machine if you're not familiar with what they look like. And again, we've got to figure out how do we guard this area where the point of operation is occurring? What can we put in there to keep our fingers out of that? Shearing machines are probably things that most of us, if we have a lot of them, are very familiar with. They come in a variety of types, hydraulics, mechanical, and pneumatic. But again, they're cutting, right? They're cutting or tearing something. Well, obviously, if they're designed to cut or tear plastic or metal, they're going to go right through any digits that happen to get in the way. So I don't think it's a surprise that they're dangerous, but what I am always surprised is people say, hey, I don't need to guard that because we hold the part far away and it's really not a problem. Well, they do make guarding for those. And these are the things that I see that are usually old machines because they last a really long time and companies have them, but they haven't upgraded them to make sure that they have machine guards that are adequate. So if you have any of these, you want to reach out to your original manufacturer and see if they have some guarding additions, or else you can go to some of the vendors that sell guarding. Bending machines, also high point of operation. Again, high force, just like some of the punching machines that we've talked about. Tube benders, power presses, they're all examples of bending machines. Power presses do have their own safety standard in addition to this general one. We're not going to go into the details of that today, but if you do have power presses, make sure you take a look at that as well. So here's some example of some bending machines. You can see where the equipment is on the left, goes in between those wheels and then gets bent. And you can see that his fingers are really accessible to that point of operation there. And then we have a bigger machine on the right. So these are all examples of things that we need to evaluate. What's the best way to safeguard our employees so that they don't get their hands in the bending machine? And then finally, we have compression machines. Again, another high deal force. So you can imagine if this is going to squash this, how it might actually create a lot of force on that person. I love this one because there are so many examples of different kinds of machine guarding that are being used in one piece of machinery or one set of lines. So I just show you that, there a lot of the things I just ran through were single point of operation, single guards needed. Well, here's a more complex activity, the horizontal injection molding, but you can see we've got 10 different guards that are being utilized here in order to protect the worker from this. It starts with movable guards, say over here, so they can put the equipment in. They have a operator gate that this will, number 3, will slide back and forth so we can get the parts in and out, but it's also interlocked so that the machine can't run if that isn't closed all the way. We have all the way down here at number 9, face shields as another form of safeguarding from parts. And then number 10, they actually have an electrical cabinet that guards the machine's electrical system. So in this particular case, it's just a matter of taking a time to walk through this machine, look at where all those hazards are, and then identifying, have we adequately protected our workers from reaching in there and coming into contact with any of the moving parts or any of the point of operation. This next slide is really a close-up of that machine, just to give you another example or a little bit closer view of that. And you can see up there at number 1, there's a guard up there to control access to the machine, the material that's being fed down in. A close-up of that number 2, that sliding door that I was telling you about. And then 3, there's also a movable guard down there that prevents access to the clamping and injector mechanisms that are being used to eject those parts out of there. So a lot going on in one piece of machine. So you can see machine guarding can be quite a challenge if in fact we have a more complex operation. All right, let's talk a little bit about power transmission apparatus, because most of us have some type of power transmission apparatus in our facilities. That's one that's pretty common. And so we're talking about when you have pulleys or gears or sprockets or chains, something that's making a machine turn. Well, obviously, if those aren't guarded, you can get caught in those. You can get pulled in just between the friction between the two parts, or sometimes when you have gears, obviously it can get caught on the gear. So these are a couple of examples, and these need to be guarded. And a lot of times I see people so focused on the point of operation on the equipment that they tend to forget these. Or this is often a place where perhaps sometimes the machine guard doesn't get back onto the equipment after a maintenance activity. And when these guards are in place, you want to look really close. I find a lot of opportunity where the front facing piece of the guard looks ideal, but then if I just put my head over, and not my fingers, put my head over the edge, I can see that if I was to put my fingers there, I could have gotten my fingers caught in the rotating parts. So you want to make sure those guards fully enclose the hazard that is present, and make sure that if you are using like a wire mesh, that the openings are small enough that we can't get our fingers in. So a lot to look for, no question. So there are other things that we call in-running nip points. Those power apparatus fit that definition, but sometimes just the process you have itself might create pinch points where there's an in-running nip point and where two rollers are coming together and they could catch someone's fingers or pull their clothing in or their hair, something like that. And I'm not going to share all the horror stories that I hear of people telling me about long hair that's gotten pulled in or a sleeve that's gotten pulled in. And it's just a horrible discussion because this equipment is so powerful that the resistance that's created by a sleeve or hair getting pulled in doesn't slow the machine down. And you can just imagine the damage that it creates for that individual that gets stuck. So really looking about how do you keep access to these points away from your employees. Conveyors are something that most of us have as well. They have in-running nip points down at the end. You can see where the arrow is. They also have rotating shafts. So important that we're looking at both of those. Sometimes you might have a conveyor that is designed to be very loose, and so it doesn't create the hazard that some of the more tight-fitting ones are, but you want to make sure that you have checked how you might be able to prevent the employees from doing that. And I know a lot of times people go, well, the conveyor won't work. Well, I have seen solutions. Sometimes it's just a small metal plate that prevents that access, or a small plastic cover. So it does, there are opportunities out there. It's just sometimes you have to be a little creative or look a little harder. This was an example of a drill press incident, and we're going to talk about administrative controls in a little bit, but this is just an example of when you should or should not wear gloves around equipment. This individual's hand was pulled into the drill press because it wasn't adequately guarded, and they were wearing PPE, loose-fitting gloves around that, and it actually pulled their hand into the drill press, and you can imagine the damage that was done. Some examples of guards that could be used on a drill press, which would have helped prevent that. Obviously, the right hand telescoping adjustable guard is a much more effective guard than the one on the left that only prevents access from one direction. So things you want to look at too when you're assessing your in particular machine guarding. Now, I will challenge any of you, if you are so disciplined that you never find this in your maintenance shop, you deserve a huge round of applause. Almost anywhere I can go, I can find a tongue guard or a tool rest that are not adequately adjusted. At the end of today, I'm going to show you a couple of tools that you can purchase to measure those. So what I have suggested to people is buy one of those tools, put it on a chain, and keep it right there next to your grinders so that the employees have a way to quickly measure Is the tongue guard adequately adjusted? Is the tool rest adequately adjusted? And hopefully that tool there reminds them that they should be looking at that every time before they use it. All right, so then safeguard barriers are something that are becoming more and more common. People are finding that rather than investing in individual guards on a piece of machinery, let's go ahead and barrier off the entire area. So I'm finding a lot more use of wire mesh gates like these around large pieces of equipment. That allows the heat to more dissipate from that piece of equipment. And if people don't have to be in there on a regular basis, then this can often be a less expensive, less cumbersome solution to some of your machine guarding options. These are usually interlocked because that way if someone opens them, the machine has to shut down. But it allows for easy access for maintenance and for operators if there are jams to clear and things like that. So a safeguard barrier like this in conjunction with interlocks is often a very effective machine guarding solution. There are also adjustable or self-adjusting safeguards like on this particular saw. So it adjusts to the different sizes of materials that you're using, which is often the complaint I hear from maintenance is like, you know, we're doing all different sizes. So there are adjustable guards that will do that so that you can accommodate for different types of sizes of pieces that you're cutting. Here's a couple other examples of the bigger interlock safeguards that I often see when I'm out and about. Like I said, these larger types of guards seem to be becoming more popular now. Yes, there's an initial cost up front, but I think the maintenance of them, the clean look that it can do in the plant, the protection that they offer is often becoming very valuable and worth that upfront investment. And again, the interlocks that are checked in there. Now, I will challenge you, if you are depending on interlocks as safeguards, I hope that you have some kind of preventive maintenance program in there to check and find out what your safeguards and are they working properly? Are those interlocks being checked? So again, back to chat real quick. And Deb shared, hey, bench grinder guarding is low flying fruit for OSHA. Oh yeah, it is, because it's easy to find and it happens a lot, doesn't it, Deb? All right, so how frequently are you inspecting and documenting your safeguards on your equipment? Are you? Is it monthly, quarterly, annually, periodically, or I'm not even sure we're checking. The power press standard has a very specific requirement, but beyond that, I think it's just really good practice for making sure that you're doing these inspections. I think it enhances the awareness of the need. It helps employees understand the importance of using the guards and putting them back, as well as it's a good way then to make sure that you don't have injuries and you can demonstrate internally that we're compliant with the standard. All right, not very many people are answering, so I'm going to guess that maybe there are some people who don't want to admit that you're not doing inspections, and I get that. So I would suggest that if you don't have some routine inspection of your equipment safeguards, that becomes something that you're doing. Some people I know, they do it as employee starts a machine up in the morning. That's part of their JHA, is to check the inspection of all the safeguards. Some people might have maintenance doing it on a preventive maintenance section. Some of you might have safety walking around doing it. I would just propose that some routine inspection is probably worth it, because machine guarding can be removed, and sometimes it's months before someone recognizes that perhaps it was moved. All right, I'm doing pretty well. I knew I have a lot of material for you, and like I said, I tried to cut some out, but I just felt I would not do good service to the topic if I cut any more out. So those were your safeguard barriers. That's what I think most of us are most familiar with when we think about machine guarding or protecting ourselves from machines. So that was the first part. Now we got 3 or 4 more to run through, but they're not as complicated or as broad of a topic. Sometimes you might find that we can use safeguarding devices. They can be presence sensing devices that shut the equipment down. That can be photoelectric, radio frequency, electromechanical. Again, then those types of things really depend on some type of preventive maintenance program to make sure that they're not going to fail. You might find that those are often pressure sensitive devices, such as standing on a mat that then communicates with the machine. Sometimes pullbacks or restraints are used. That used to be a primary means of machine guarding back, gosh, when I first started in the business. Fortunately, we've not limited to that anymore. There are still some places I see using it, but other options have been integrated since then. And then you might have a safety trip control where if I get too close to a machine, as I move close, maybe my hips touch something, it trips the machine and the machine shuts down. We also might find two-hand devices where you have to put two hands on buttons to make the machine rotate. That means that my hands are out of the way right before the operation occurs. I have unfortunately seen people being creative and sliding a piece of wood or a piece of rebar or metal in on one of the bar control panel buttons that holds it down, and then they still only have to use one hand. They say it's quicker. However, obviously it's defeating the whole purpose of having two hands to push down so that I make sure both of my hands are out of the way of point of operation. So if you have these, I would challenge you to make sure that people aren't finding shortcuts in order to meet production quotas when they're trying to get those things done. This is often an area, this guarding of a pedal. So let's say that my pedal is depressed, right, to rotate the machine. So I consciously are making a decision to activate that machine. So my hands are back, I step on that pedal. Usually these pedals are far enough away from the machine that I can't get my hands in when I do that. A couple of things I've seen happen is people move the pedal closer to the machine so they don't have to step back so far and save time. But again, that defeats the purpose of being far enough away to keep your hands out of the way. So I think these need bolted to the floor so they can't be moved closer. And then I've also seen the top of those get damaged from forklift traffic. And then obviously the operator of the machine is working around some safeguarding in order to make the machine still work, even though their foot clamp may have been damaged or maybe even is now non-existent. So again, something to check for as part of your weather inspection. New and improved, right? While I've been in the business, light curtains have started to replace the good pullbacks from your hands. And light curtains are really a source on one side, a receiver on the other side, and that light goes across and is received. If it's broken, so something gets in the way, it shuts down the machine. It is a great source of guarding and keeping people away from point of operation, but obviously the curtain has to be far enough away that I can't, by the time the machine shuts down, when I break that plane of light, I can't get my hand into the point of operation. So that distance that it has to be is usually based on the machine's stopping ability. How fast can it stop if we power it down? And then the distance between and sensitivity of that light. You cannot use these on full revolution mechanical power presses though, but for other types of machines, it works pretty well. And then there's always location and distance, right? If we can eliminate or get our employees away from the hazard, always a benefit to us. So in some cases, we'll put the control panels far enough away that they can't possibly get to the operation. Sometimes I think you have to be careful there because if other employees are in the area and you haven't adequately guarded this, or that barrier across the front isn't large enough, you might have secondary employees, not the operator themselves, but other employees who may be at risk. So consider both if you're considering location and distance as your source of protection. And then there are other just miscellaneous aids that we can use. Barriers just to remind us, protective shields of some sort, tools so that we use the parts, move the parts so we don't get our hands in there. So remember, OSHA is really saying any of all of these are acceptable, and that in many cases, you're going to use a combination of these things to protect your workers. So I think a combination in many cases is definitely the option that we end up going, because any one particular safeguard isn't always the total solution. So having gone out and done your assessment, one of the things I'm going to suggest is put together a machine guarding program. While OSHA doesn't say you have to have a written program like so many other things, hearing conservation, silica, whatever that would be, I think a machine guarding program is a good addition to your safety program. And that would look like, how do we do a risk assessment? How often are we doing inspections? And what kind of training have we done? And I think if you're doing those three things, then I think you're going to be pretty effective at controlling hazards as a result of machine guarding. So if you decide to do risk assessments, you can certainly do a visual inspection, right? Some of you might like to be more detail oriented or more data driven. And there are a number of documents out there that reference different types of risk assessment strategies. I'm just throwing them out there if you want to use something like that. So there's 3 listed for you, and they help you determine if it's an acceptable risk or not. So if you're in a big company that has a lot of machines that need guarded and you have to do budget justifications, having more data to do a specific risk assessment other than just professional opinion sometimes is really valuable, right? Now, obviously, you can also call Carrie and Deb and Nick and have them come out and help you do this as well, and give you a second professional opinion. And I encourage you to do that because we are blessed to have the BWC folks as a resource here. Then I would look at, what does your program say about periodic and regular inspections? What equipment are you going to inspect? How frequently are you going to inspect it all? And it could be all of the equipment. It could be your auxiliary equipment. You might have equipment that's in a locked room, or you might have equipment that's on a, shoot, my mind just went blank, whatever you call those elevated work areas, not the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. Anyway, when you look at those areas, they may be locked, and so there is limited access to those areas. So you might treat those slightly different from an effective safeguard as you would where employees are working all of the time. And you might consider that your record's going to say, okay, I inspected this. Here's the inspection that I did. This is the method I followed, what date it was, who did that inspection, and then obviously keeping track of that number of that piece of equipment. And one of the areas I think we, just if you're going to do a less data-driven risk assessment using ANSI or ISO, is just to go out and begin looking about where you might have people that are at risk. So one of the things that's often recommended is go look at the vulnerable neutral body parts. And what do I mean by that? We'll look from mid-thigh up to belt buckle. And that's kind of that yellow band you see across the slide there. And you can see that even though people are of different heights, that band pretty much covers everybody from thigh to belt buckle. And then that is a good place to understand where we are at greatest risk because our hands are moving in there, and we have more action going on. And then also look at where you're below that, from your knee to the top of your foot. Those are places that we're not looking at as often. And so there are risks when machines are not adequately guarded in that lower region because our legs and may come into contact with those things. Some people like to put machine guarding stickers to remind people that stickers are available or that this is a machine guard and make it available. I think, you know, anytime that you're using some kind of reminder like a sticker or a sign, they work very well for a while, but then like everything, we kind of become immune to our surroundings if they've been there in our face all the time. So I think they can be mixed benefit, but sometimes people find them very useful, particularly if you're educating employees about what to look for. So a lot of people have names for this thing called the OSHA Guard Safety Scale. Some people call it the gotcha stick. Some people call it the machine guarding ruler. But if you don't have one of these, I would encourage you to get one. They're really valuable for making sure when you're doing those risk assessments, if your access to the point of operation is adequately guarded. So you can imagine the lower my guard is in front of that point of operation, the less distance I need to keep myself away because I can't get my fingers in. If my guard has openings, then how far is it from that machine guard to where point of operation occurs? And this OSHA Guard Safety Scale helps you measure that and make a decision if your guarding is adequate to prevent access to that point of operation. So I think it should be in every safety person's toolbox. And then the next one would be the bench grinder scale that I mentioned earlier. And I have a bigger picture coming up so you can see that. And if you've not gone on OSHA's website and used their e-tool under machine guarding, I think it's pretty decent to help you make some decisions. So here's your bench grinder safety gauge. This is the one I was talking about, and you can see that it has the tool rest and the tongue guard measurements. So if you had one of these next to all of your bench grinders, it's a great awareness for those maintenance team members to double check the tool rest and the tongue guard, make sure that they're adequately measured, and you can tell from sticking that tool in there if they're close enough. So it's a good reminder and a way to measure the tool. And I think if you had those, might help eliminate some of those easy things that OSHA can catch, or someone can honestly get hurt, which is more important. All right, one more poll out of curiosity. Get ready to put your answers in chat. How often are you training your operators on the safeguards of their equipment? What they should be looking for? How do they work with that guard? Like, why shouldn't I put the top up on my lathe? Are you doing training? And if so, how often? So my question is, do you do it as part of orientation or onboarding? Do you do it annually? Do you do it after an accident, or you don't really have anything formal? So I got one at orientation. Anybody else? Are you willing to share? Because everybody likes to know what everybody's doing. All right, so we've got orientation if you have an accident, orientation every 6 months, so orientation. All right, so if you're doing a lot of onboarding or orientation, you're probably doing a lot of it, right? If you've had people that have been there 30 years, then maybe they need a refresher. So as part of your risk assessment going forward, you might want to assess, are we doing enough orientation, onboarding annually after an accident, whatever, from a training perspective? I would suggest that anytime there's an accident, that would be one of my corrective actions that I would certainly do, is make sure that anyone that's working on that type of piece of equipment gets retrained on the importance of the machine guards and why we keep them in place and how we work with those. So those of you who answered, thank you so much for the chat. Helps me stay engaged too, because I can't see all of you. All right, so what would you cover in that training? Well, who takes care of, and this is specifically from the Power Press standard, but I think it can be applied across the board to all of our equipment. Who takes care of the equipment? Who does the maintenance on it? What's your role as the operator? Who's doing inspections on it? And then when I'm operating it, what's my limitations or my interactions with guards? Should I be checking for guarding in the morning? What if a guard's not there? Who do I report that to? If I've got a damaged guard or a loose guard, who should I tell? Those kinds of things to make sure that our machine guarding can stay accurate. I would obviously make sure that our employees know what the best practices are. You know, that we should only operate that equipment when the guards are in place. Don't remove a guard. If you need to do something in the machine that the guard has to come out, then you need to have some assistance with that, or we need to make sure we've gone through the lockout tagout process first. Those often go together. And then make sure that we're not wearing any loose clothing, long hair, or jewelry. And thanks, Deb. Deb reminded everyone, and don't forget to include your new or modified guarding as part of that. So yes, thank you. I think some of your best practices are inspect your guarding daily. And if you are going to use signage, this is not ideal, right? Make sure your warning signs are legible and not been washed so many times that they no longer are apparent. And then have a practice that if someone sees something wrong with a piece of machinery guarding, that they're reporting that promptly, and document that. And then make sure that we're having a corrective action with a deadline of getting that repaired. So you know me, I like to challenge you. So I know I just had a lot of information I threw at you. Hopefully it wasn't new for most of you. Hopefully it was just a good reminder, but some things to go and look at. Go find some machines in your facility today. How's the guarding? Are they guarded? Is it adequate, inadequate? And look behind. Can I get my fingers in? Is it far enough away from point of operation? Is it in good condition? Are my signs good? All those things we've been talking about. And if it's not ideal, is there a better solution that's going to protect your worker? So even if you just go look at 3 machines today, it'll be better than not doing anything about this. Here's some resources that are available to you as well. And with that, I think it's back to Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Carrie's actually gone, so it's back to me for now. Dianne, thank you very, very much for the knowledge on the machine guarding. I know you could have gone on for hours, but you provided great information. Many thanks to you. If anyone has any questions for Dianne, put those in the chat now, if you would. I also have a gas card to give away today, and that is going to Cindy Mackery from Ellett Signs. So Cindy, if you're still there, please put something in the chat so I know you're there. And we also have 5 bench grinder safety guards to give away today. And those are going to go to the first 5 people who put their name and email address in the chat. And do we have any questions? Deb, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just that, again, those bench grinders are the same ones that that Rockford had, the one that actually Cindy, or that Dianne had a picture of. These are plastic, and again, I agree, by chaining those on to your bench grinders, or at least near your bench grinders, we know that the folks are going to be using them, and train them to do that, because one $13,000 citation can buy a whole lot of bench grinder cards or a bunch of bench grinders.
Or an injury.
Or an injury, absolutely. Prevent one is a bigger thing.
Okay, I don't see any questions. Deb, do you see anything?
No, see some addresses. I don't see any questions.
Yep, lots of addresses. Okay. Well, I will have the recording as well as Dianne's PowerPoint presentation out to you later today or tomorrow, and also information regarding the Charity Wellness Challenge. So with that, I'm going to close it. Next month, we will, keeping with our OSHA Top 10 theme, we will have Lockout Tagout next month with Tracy Combs. I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Stay well and stay safe. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Give
Thanks,
Dianne
everyone.
a round of applause.
Thanks for having me, everyone. Make it a safe and productive day.